Like that. Hello, Pelagic. Welcome to our August 2023 meeting. We are delighted to be here in the presence of a professional sailor whose credentials are hard to duplicate. I think that'd be an appropriate term. 8 years. Took her a little bit of time to get there. I reached out to Dawn Riley a couple months ago and she said, "What the heck is Pelagic Sailing Club?" And I explained it to her and we went back and forth and she was very gracious with her time to say, "Yeah, I can get up there. I've got something planned in Newport that week, which works perfectly. I'll go from Newport to Boston back to Newport." And then life happened. And now she's got a crazy busy schedule, but she's been gracious enough to carve out still some time for us in person. So I would like to introduce to you 4-time America's Cup, 2-time around the world, and member of 2 National Hall of Fames in sailing, Dawn Riley. Come on up.
Thank you. Yes. The shorthand is I'm a dual famer now. I didn't know that was a thing. So I am in the International America's Cup Hall of Fame and the National Sailing Hall of Fame. But what my family really likes is I'm going back to Detroit to be in the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame in September. And the real reason that they like that is because I'm in there with a hockey player and like a legend of Michigan State football and a bunch of other people. So they're pretending to come to see me and celebrate me, but they really want to see the other cool people, I'm sure. So I do a lot of speaking. I do corporate speaking, motivational speaking. I'm a coach. I do a lot of stuff, but I know that this group is a little less racy. Like if I start going on about the foils on the mochas, you're just going to glaze over. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my background, a little bit about Oakcliff, which is what I'm doing now, and tell just a couple stories, but I'm very much interested in your questions. And we will just kind of keep it casual there. So yes, my name's Dawn Riley. I grew up in Michigan, in St. Clair Shores, Michigan, Harrison Township, Mount Clemens. Everybody thinks when I say my great grandfather was a sailmaker, but he was really a canvas maker. And he had a friend named Ford, and he made all the canvas tops for the Model Ts because that's when they were still doing shipping by sail through the Great Lakes, when you think that far back. Now, unfortunately, he wasn't a great businessman after that, so we didn't grow up with rich and yacht clubby at all. But the sailing passed down to my grandmother, to my father, and then to our family. And my father tells stories that he would spend every Sunday in church trying to stare through the stained glass windows to see if the leaves were moving so he could go sailing, being praying to God, "Do we have wind, please?" so he could go sailing. So he was, needless to say, a little bit obsessive about sailing. And as kids, we didn't have an option because you don't, at least back then. Nowadays, you get to like ask your mother for the menu of what you would like to do this weekend. Then it was like, get on the boat, we're going sailing. So we sailed every single weekend. We lived on the boat most of the summer. We went skiing at a really cheap Apple Pickers dormitory lodge in the winter. And when my parents' dream was to sail for a year. Dove had happened, so there was some of that National Geographic extended cruising that got into their mind. So they saved for 6 years. And we sailed with our family in a wooden 36-foot boat from Detroit out the Barge Canal to New York City, up to Maine, down to Florida, the Bahamas, Grenada, the Virgins, Caribbean, Grenada, and back. 1 year and 7 days. So I figured this is a little bit exciting for some of you guys. So the first thing is Jaws came out in 1976. So we were somewhat afraid, but my grandparents literally told my, in their minds, hippie parents, and my parents were not hippies, hippie parents, you can go kill yourselves, but leave the children with us, right? We end up leaving the dog with them, but not the children. And so it was a 36-foot wooden boat. My mother planned extensively for those 6 years, reading National Geographic, cutting things out, researching. So we did things like we went to the farm and got the eggs, as long as you never refrigerate it. I'm sure some of you guys know this, but if you don't refrigerate the eggs when they pop out of the chicken, you don't have to refrigerate the eggs. You can leave them in the bilge. Now she wrapped them in, or in the cupboard, underneath the seat lockers. She did wipe them down with Vaseline in case there was salt water that got into them. So we had eggs from the farm. We had something that was smoked ham, that we now know is Serrano ham, right? So everybody knows that, or prosciutto. But back then, no American knew that. We didn't, when we read about the book about the guy who had lived in the life raft for 74 days and he ate raw fish, we were like, ew, now we eat sushi. Think about the, 50, 40 years ago, the difference in the survivalist stuff that we were doing on the boat, that my grandparents thought we were going to die, but it was amazing. So we had fresh eggs. She went to the Mormon church and got freeze dried because they were preparing for the end of the world. So we had freeze dried cheese mix and bacon and a can and eggs and ham. And the one thing about the smoked ham that was funny is that on a 36-foot wooden boat with 5 people for a year, the only place we could have the ham hanging was in the head, which was not good when you were on starboard tack, because it would be hitting you in the head when you were in the head as it's swinging around. So that was a pivotal year for us to be able to go as kids. I was 13, I was 12, turned 13, to be able to go and see the world by boat. So like we saw the Statue of Liberty for the first time. We saw Wales for the first time. We saw Disneyland World, whichever one it is in Florida, for the first time, all by boat. Came back to Michigan, and there was a regatta at Bayview Yacht Club, and they asked me if I wanted to sail. Up until this point, I was still, as a teenager would be, a little bit not convinced that I really liked sailing, because it was something that my parents made me do. So I get on this boat called an Etchells, and I go sailing with some really old people, 28, 30-year-old people. And I was so much better than them. So I had gained the confidence of my dad yelling at me to trim the sails, put down the book, put the sails, do a sail change a sail with Hanks, racing sail change, jibe the spinnaker, that I got on that boat. And I had the confidence to say, I like this. I'm going to do this. I'm good. I'm going to sail all the time. And so I was obsessed, and I would go into the bar at 13 and bug people, go, I hear you need crew. They're like, yeah. Look, I'm like, no, tomorrow, I'll be here tomorrow. So I was that pain in the ass little kid that just bugged everybody to go sailing as much as I possibly could. And by the time I was 15, I was being paid to go sailing, because I would be the professional boat captain. And in the Great Lakes, this is at my handy map, Michigan. So I was in Detroit, but there's these things called the Mackinacs. So we'd have to deliver to Port Huron. We'd race to Mackinac Island. Then we delivered to Chicago. Then we raced to Chicago. And then we delivered back to Port Huron, and then into the Detroit. And then we'd also do the Lake Erie series. So there was a lot of boat movement, and I was the boat captain for that. And for instance, my parents were crazy when they let me do what they let me do, but they had this thing where they said, we trust you. And you're like, oh God, she trusts me. There's pressure. I've got to do well. But it worked, because there was a lot of things that were crazy adults doing crazy things. And I was a 15-year-old girl just going, I can't do that. They were all way too asleep. I learned how to bleed a diesel engine on the delivery from Mackinac to Chicago by reading a manual. Everybody else was asleep, hungover. And so I had to figure it out for myself. So it was completely and totally empowering to be a 15, 16-year-old female and just figure it out for myself. And most things on boats, you can figure out for yourself. When you start getting into the B&G and electronic systems, it's a little bit crazier, but most things are just physics and math and reading a manual and following instructions. So anyway, so I did that. I put myself through college, Michigan State University. I was captain of the sailing team, but I was going to get a job in advertising, be normal, go to Madison Avenue and be in that world. And then the recession hit. So there were no jobs. I had a job for one day at the Hertz at BBD&O on the Hertz rent-a-car account. Read my newspaper. I didn't even drink coffee at that point. Read my newspaper, and I read in the business section, BBD&O loses Hertz rent-a-car account. I'm like, oh. I had a job for one day. But the boats that I was working on asked me to come down to Florida. So I was working on a boat in Florida, SORC, and I found out that there was a team going around the world called Maiden. And it was all women. And I was like, I don't want to sail with a bunch of chicks, because I had never sailed with significant numbers of women. And a few that I had sailed with were because there just weren't that many there in terms of racing competitively. And if you watch the movie, my friend Cindy goes, give your head a shake. You're not that special, lady. And she said, go try out. So I tried out. I made the team. How many people have seen the movie Maiden? Okay. It's really cheap now. You can go see it on Amazon, I think. So that was the first all women's team to race around the world. I was a watch captain, diver, and engineer. We went from England to Punta del Este, Uruguay, down around, did not stop in Africa. Everybody's like, how were the lions? And we're like, we didn't stop in South Africa. We were racing. We were closer to Antarctica than we were to Cape Town. And then to Perth, Australia, around the bottom of Tasmania, up over the top to Auckland, New Zealand, around Cape Horn to Punta del Este, Uruguay, and then from Uruguay to Fort Lauderdale for the first time it stopped in America, the first time ESPN was covering the race, and then from Fort Lauderdale to England. So it's 33,000 miles. It was about 9 months. We stopped on each one of those stops to get the boats, redone and fix everything and see the boys. And then so then we, in the beginning, were told, and those of you who saw the movie, those guys are real when they're like, I didn't think they were going to be able to make it. And they had it in the newspaper. You could make money on betting that we would make it, because so many people were betting that we would not make it. And we not only made it, but we ended up second around the world. So that was very good. Then I did a second around the world race, which was totally different. Same course, different boats. There'd been a mutiny on board with an American skipper, and they made it to Punta del Este, Uruguay. I was sitting at my house in Michigan, and I got a call from the race organizers saying, we have a bit of a problem. The women's team is in Uruguay, and they've had a mutiny, and they don't have the money, but we have a sponsor, Heineken, but they're only going to sponsor it if you only come here and bring a few people. And I was like, I don't think so. My mom is like, Dawn's going to race around the world again. I'm like, I got to do it, not you. And so I was like, oh my God. And then they said the whole back to the Catholic guilt. If you don't do this, women will be put back centuries in sailing. And it's like, oh, you're killing me. So I made a few phone calls and got 4 other people to fly to Punta with me. This was on a Sunday, and the race started the following Saturday. So the funny little story about that is that when you go shopping for long underwear in Michigan in October, it's hunting season. So we had orange camouflage long underwear on the race, which is not very nautical, but it was warm enough. That one, the boat hadn't been prepared clearly. It wasn't, the engineering wasn't correct, and we ended up losing our rudder 3 times. So it made an amazing story And it wasn't until I retyped part of the book, because we republished it in paperback, that I remembered, seriously, it's 93, 94. My mind was, we lost the rudder, we sucked, we finished second to last. The one leg that we had the rudder and decent sails, we were third. So we were competitive. We just had some really bad luck. At the end, in the question and answer, and everybody wants to know how to steer a boat without a rudder, I can tell you, because I got a lot of experience. So in between that, I've done 4 America's Cups. 1992, I was the only female on the America Cube team with Bill Koch in San Diego. In 1995, I was the team captain of the all women's team, also called America Cubed. In 2000, I put together my own campaign, America True, which we tried to make the diverse team, but it was a truly co-ed team with about 20-25% females in every part of the organization. And then I finally went mercenary after doing some TV, and I was the general manager of the French team in Valencia. So 4 America's Cups. So what I'm going to do now is just pause and show this video, and I'll talk over it. I'm not sure how this is working for the Zoom people, sorry, but the America's Cup, beautiful trophy. It doesn't have a bottom, so it has a bottom this far down. You can put like a cup of champagne in it. That was starting in England, made in the 1980s. The world was pink. IACC boats in San Diego Harbor, fleet racing before we went match racing, because America's Cup, of course, is match racing one-on-one. This is a way to get everybody to figure out how fast you were or not. That was sailing into Fort Lauderdale in bathing suits and dancing in the Southern Ocean. The 60-foot boats, that's one that lost the rudder. And then the IACC boats, America's Cup boats, were about 80 feet long. Every once in a while, you go a little bit crazy out at sea. That's Buddy and Bill Koch. Dave Delaba, John Polius. We had some excellent coaches. The spinnakers are about 5,000 square feet. And back then, we'd get them up and down in about 17 seconds. Nowadays, that's slow. The end of a boom. And that, if you look, is the horizon. So that's a true broach. There's about a 90-degree broach there. That's Dennis Connor and Paul Kayer. If you don't like them, Tom Whitten's okay. He owns, or he's the CEO of North Sales now. So the top of the mast, about 120 feet up. And that was about a 30-foot sea there. Icebergs, of course. She had a harness on. That's a $500,000 mast. The French dropped their boat off the crane and then the keel fell off. Oh, shocker. And then that was the only boat to ever sink so far during an America's Cup race. The sponsor the next day, it's Australian, had great advertising. Nothing goes down better than a Foster's. True story. That's the New York Yacht Club's team with the mermaid on the side, but we were the women's team and we were in front in that video. What was what? Different boats. I was the skipper on Heineken, the watch captain on Maiden, head person in 92, team captain and skipper on the next two. Gloria was getting kelp off the rudder, but we used Dawn dish soap to wash her hair. See, we got a few stitches there. And that last shot was sailing into Auckland, New Zealand, which is, before we get to that question, my favorite place in the world to sail. And we can talk about sailing and cruising in New Zealand whenever we want. So that's basically, that was 12 years of my life there, that video in 4 minutes. So I was going to just take a minute to tell 2 stories that show to me anecdotally the difference and the progress we made in women in sailing from 1992 America's Cup to 1995. So there's a few things that happened in the 1995 time. One was that there was America Cube, the all women's team. There was also, most people don't really remember it, the Silver Bullets, which was I'm not even in baseball, but Division A, no, it was not softball. It was a Division A baseball team. So they played against all the farm leagues and for the major leagues. There was the League of Their Own movie. There was the Atlanta Olympics. So it was a huge step forward for women in sports. But there also was the fact that there was, in 1992, I was the only female on the America's Cup team, and I was on the A team. I was primary pit person, and I had to do an open tryout like everybody else. There were probably 300 people that tried out, and there was about 7 or 8 women, and I was the only one that made the team. We had 38 sailors on the team, and I was the only female. I got my own locker room, which was good, but and so in that, San Diego actually looks like this a whole lot in the summer. People don't understand that. The tourism board does not tell you that San Diego has this thing called June gloom, which is there from early May until sometime in August. And it's in the morning, it's like this. And then during the day, it moves out where we're sailing. So we were basically in fog for months of 2-boat testing. And 2-boat testing, you put the boats there, you sail for 10 minutes, you reline up, you change something on one boat, you sail for 10 minutes. The boffins in the computer room say, oh, we didn't get that one. Can you do it again? So they're long, long days out there on the water. And we all lived at Oakwood Apartments, where there was like corporate apartments and there was jacuzzis in the middle. And so, of course, after being out there all day, we would come in and we'd be like, oh my God, we're freezing. We'd all jump in the jacuzzi. So there were a lot of other people like nurses and women that might notice that there were some really strong, athletic men in white uniforms jumping into the jacuzzi around 7 o'clock at night. So all of a sudden there would be women going, oh, I think I need a jacuzzi. And so they were coming down. And to give you, for instance, Lou Ferrigno, the Incredible Hulk's nephew, Rock Ferrigno, was one of these grinders. So we're not talking chopped liver here. So the women would be there, and they would be, of course, flirting with the guys. And they're like, oh, what do you do on the boat? And Rock's a trimmer, and there's this one woman who sailed, so she knew. And Johnny Mac was Rock was a grinder, and Johnny Mac was a trimmer. And then they go, and Dawn races with us too. And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I do the pit. She's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I do the pit, which, in case you don't know racing terms, it's where all the halyards come and go and nothing happens on the boat unless I say so. Nothing goes up, nothing comes down, because I'm in charge of the boat secretly. I was like, I do the pitch. And then all of a sudden she goes, oh, you make the sandwiches. And it was just like, are you freaking kidding me? Of course, the guys almost drowned laughing. So that was a story. So then jump ahead. The next campaign that we did was the 1995 all women's team. And it was America Cube, the women's team. And we were competitive. They thought that we were not going to be. They thought that we would be not be strong enough. We did end up putting one man on the boat at the very end, Dave Dellenbaugh, because we just didn't have the experience, and we wanted to win the America's Cup. We were not there for the sideshow, and we needed just that. The tactician on a race boat has to be the most experienced. They have to know what's going to happen, what has to happen before it happened so they can think about it, figure it out, and tell the helms person in order to execute it. And we just didn't have that depth of experience because I was the only person who had ever sailed in the America's Cup on the boat. So we brought Dave Dellenby in, but he was, as he said, I might be mighty on the boat, but I'm a flea in the gym. He couldn't lift anything. He was the weakest physical person on the boat. All of the women were stronger than him, including Lisa Chuck, who was tiny. So anyway, we were there, we were competing, we were tied. We came down to one race where if we beat Dennis Conner, he would be eliminated, and we beat him. What we did not know is that our management, Bill Koch, did not believe in us, and they had made a deal where the New York Yacht Club team was already 1 point ahead. So they were going to get 2 points going into the final series, and the winner of this match would get 1 point and the other person would get 0 points. So they bet against us. When we finished, the B team was over and they were crying, and Dateline TV's there with Christy Brinkley. And I'm like, we just beat Dennis Conner. We just eliminated the evil Dennis Conner. Why are you guys so upset? And they told us the deal. It's the only time in my life that when they interviewed me, literally Christy Brinkley, I just dropped the F-bomb so they couldn't use it. I was like, this is fucking bull, because it was so, it pissed us off so much. So then we put on our big girl panties, and we're going into the finals. And we are again in the situation. This time is whoever loses goes away, and the New York Yacht Club team is the last one you get to race against them. We are 6.5 minutes ahead of Dennis at the last top mark. It is super light air. We're kind of pointed at the finish. There is so little wind. I'm standing on the gooseneck and I'm saying, I don't see any wind. There's spectator boat chop. The only thing I maybe see is all the way at Point Loma on shore. And Courtney, the navigator, says, but we're almost pointed at the finish. We can't jibe away. Well, we're 3/4 of the way down the leg and Dennis jibes. Because what else are you going to do? You don't follow, you go the other way. He picks up that wind. He comes back. ESPN has already gone to baseball because they're like, the women are going to the America's Cup. And then they have to cut back because he comes in. We get to the finish line and he finishes just overlapped with us and eliminates us. So again, before a lot of technology, faxes. So people faxed us congratulations. And then there's little girls calling and crying and saying, we wanted the women to win. You know, it's just this drama. So we moved through it. But a couple days later, I'm outside the Team New Zealand camp. And there's my boyfriend happened to be there, fiance actually. That didn't work out. But anyway, I'm outside there waiting for him to get out of work because they're still campaigning. And this homeless guy comes in with all of the cans and everything. He goes, are you one of those women? And I'm wearing full America Cube uniform. I'm like, America Cube? Yeah. He goes, you know what? God wanted you to lose. Okay. You know why? He goes, because God loves you. I'm like, I can go with that. He goes, and God hates Dennis Conner. And God knows that the New Zealanders are going to be faster and Dennis Conner is going to lose. And he doesn't want the women to lose. I was like, okay. So those are two rather random stories to tell you the difference between 1992, when a sailing woman could not comprehend a female being on a boat unless she was making the sandwiches, to a homeless guy justifying why Dennis Conner beat us. So it's a random way to show progress, but there was amazing progress at that time. And especially in all of sports, but in sailing, that went, when I would do speeches like this before, there would be a couple that would have gotten divorced and it'd be a female in the crowd. And inevitably they would come up and say, I used to be a sailor, but then I got divorced and he kept the boat. I'd be like, well, get your own boat. Oh, I don't know. After the women's team, I do speeches, people would come up, women come up, they go, yep, I learned to sail with my husband, divorced his ass, and I got the boat. I'm like, yay, keep going. So that was just a comment on society and I've been able to see as we're going through. Since I'm on that topic, I might as well just take a minute to talk about diversity, because when I said with America True, we wanted to be the diverse team, and there was not a pool to pull from. So instead of doing what corporate America was doing back then, going, oh, sorry, there's nobody, can't do that, not possible, not experienced enough. You know, they did that to women, gender, and then racial diversity. We said, well, screw this, we're going to do it. We're going to make a difference. So we had 28 clubs that were partner clubs, true allies. We got a little, and then we had true youth. And the only thing you had to do as a partner club of ours was to promote us and be our fans. And I would come and do one speech a year, and you would do one true youth event a year, which meant you would take your boats, you would go find people that would never have been on a boat, a boys and girls club, first time offender, church group, whatever it was. Well, the church first time offenders, you got to bring their parole officers. We found that out. So we say, you get the boats, I'm going to do the speech, and we're going to do a true youth day. And the whole message of that was, we want you kids to understand that there's a whole lot of things you haven't tried. If you want to keep sailing, we will help you keep sailing. We're not trying to be evangelists and make you sailors yet. We're trying to get in there, but not yet. We just want you to try something else. So we ended up 28 different clubs. We did way more than that over the years. There's at least 10 community sailing programs still in existence today from that program. And when I spoke last night at Nantucket Community Sailing, I was trying to get across to them, you don't know which kid you're going to make a difference, but you are making a difference. And you never know when you're going to get the feedback. So I was doing a speech. We did this with Atlanta, Lake Lanier Sailing Club. Anybody know them? Okay. Teddy Turner's from there. It's the good old boys South. And I'm setting up, getting ready to do the speech, and they have a big dinner planned, and Don Riley's coming. And they go, well, you see, there's a problem because we're not going to do the true youth because some of our members have a problem. Like, what problem? Well, there's going to be Black children here. I'm like, uh-huh. And I said, well, they just have a problem with that. I said, well, I got a problem with that. And I pull the computer. I'm like, I'm out of here. Taxi. I'm like, wait. They made some phone calls, and I sat, you can imagine me. And they go, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. So we did it. About 5 years ago, I went back to a resort at Lake Lanier and was doing a corporate speech. And the taxi driver was the church group leader from that day, and they are still doing True Youth Days today, every year at Lake Lanier. So I didn't know that for 20 some years. And then you go back and you're like, oh my God, we can make a difference. So I'm imploring you to continue to make a difference and never say, oh, well, you just can't do that. It's not safe. Oh, insurance. Oh my God, what happens if they get wet? No, bring people into sport. I think I'm preaching to the choir here, because you guys are all about bringing new people into sport. So in other words, just keep doing what you're doing. So America True, we went into the semifinals in second. We had the women and children boat, and we kicked ass. We eliminated Dennis Conner from the America's Cup. Finally. It got down to between us and Paul Cayard, and he ended up beating us. And then the Italians ended up beating him. And then the Kiwis ended up winning. So that is what that is. But we continued that True Youth Foundation. We had about $3 million left over. We kept that going until about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And we rolled the $170,000 left in it because it wasn't needed, because so many great people are doing their own community sailing programs. We didn't need to keep doing it ourselves. So we've rolled that into a scholarship fund specifically for need-based scholarships for community sailing graduates at Oakcliff. So let me talk to you about Oakcliff. Briefly, training and coaching center in Oyster Bay, Long Island, and I'm Dawn if you're there. And we are a place where we're year round. We have 100 boats. One has a headboard car issue right now. That's what I was stressed about earlier. Hopefully it'll be really, really windy and they'll win the race with one refit. So we have 100 boats. We train in offshore, inshore match racing, high performance Olympic sailing, sailmaking, engineering, design, business, legal. It's basically supplemental to a formal education. And for some people, it's more valuable than a formal education. We have an on-site online high school there. So let me just show you the video of this so you get a bit of a. So that boat actually is in Charleston. It's a class 40 for a shorthanded boat. In the beginning, we said we're not going to do anything in high performance because that's the Olympics and US sailing. Then US sailing didn't do such a great job of that. And so we ended up doing a lot more of that. And I'm actually now trying to put all of that back together, but that's something you guys don't even want to know about. So, again, we have over 100 boats. We sent 90 people on 5 different boats to the Bermuda race last year. We do offshore. That boat raced the transatlantic to get it delivered because it was donated to us in England. We have more than this. We also have a Jewel Rolex 66, 2 more Far 40s, and OC 86. This is Mark and Charlie. This is the Oakcliff All-American Offshore team. So 11th hour racing that just won the around the world race. Those are our graduates. That's that right there. That's a 14-year-old, 6'4", 240 pounders. That's why originally we're only 18 and above. Now we're 15 and above. Again, anything theoretically they break, we teach them how to fix. So composites, we have a rigging shop, we have a full sail loft. Not so great on the electronics, just because that's one thing I'm not great on. We do have the largest Olympic fleet in the world with the 49ers, the FX, the NACRA. We have lasers, we have 470s. And it's not a coincidence that the 49er and the FX are the only 2 that have qualified for the Olympics for the US just this week. So that's because of Oakcliff. The match 40s, then we built a bunkhouse. So if you need a place to stay on your cruising, we have 7 showers and 43 bunk beds. So anyway, I don't know what to do with this computer now because it's zoomed. I don't want to touch it. So that is just basic. That's just a really quick video about what we have going on. There's a few brochures here. The cool part is, as you saw in the very end, we're building American leaders through sailing. So much like True Youth, where we were just making sure that people were following your dreams, dream it, do it. Sailing is the tool to build the leaders. So it's a leadership tool. And we try to keep that as the overall goal. How many people here are successful in business? So if you're only looking at the minutiae, you're like, we've got to sell this thing. You're not going to sell that thing. If you're like, why does this thing mean something to us? Our bottom line, because we have pride in it. Why does the customer want it? Because it fills a need. If you start to keep the big picture, that is what we're trying to do here at Oakcliff. We've been in existence for 13 years. I was a consultant, a failed consultant, because the answer was not my answer, actually. It was the people that hired me. I said, here's the project. There's 5 different things. I did the full SWOT analysis. What does America need? And they said, well, we need this. I'm like, great, see ya. Like, no, you gotta run it. I'm like, no. Consultants that say the answer is to hire me are failed consultants. That's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to give them the project and let them go. And then they did the same old, I shouldn't tell everybody this, guilt. Well, we've invested. We believe in you. if you don't do this, who will? I'm like, oh man, it was like 3 years. That's it. Cause I was going to do my 5th America's Cup. And then, we got to 3 years and the America's Cup had been advanced. So I didn't have an America's Cup team, but I still was leaving. And they were the board president was making my life miserable. He wanted my job. That's another bad business thing. And finally I called the family who was the original people that gave the seed funding, startup venture capital, whatever you want to call it. And I said, it's like Christmas Eve. I said, I got an idea. How about we rip up the contract and I show up for work? You pay me. If I'm doing a shit job, don't pay me. If I don't want to be there, I won't show up. Then you don't pay me. And they're like, would you do that? I'm like, yes, because I believe in the product so much and I believe in what we're doing and the lives we're changing, of course. And so that was 10 years ago now, 13 years of doing this. And my friends who are in the America's Cup, I say it's like the America's Cup that never ends. Because in the America's Cup, you're like, I have no social life. I am working out every day. I am sailing. I am working. I'm waking up in the middle of the night, worrying about how I can make something faster or better. And then the good news-ish about the America's Cup is you either win or lose, but no matter what, it's over. The bad news about an America's Cup is when it's over, you're unemployed. So you're like, yeah, I've got vacation. Oh, actually I'm unemployed. Oh shit, now what do I do? But that's kind of like the project base that I'm sure other people have been in when you're in projects, and it's kind of exciting. So that's kind of my little spiel. Now it's over to you guys. What do you want to know? Oh, pardon? Yes, I will repeat the question. I do this for a profession. So, how do the kids pay for it? What are the financials behind the whole thing? So we're a public nonprofit. We're based off of more of a YMCA model, than we are an art museum, although art museums have, tuition or entry fees. So it is tuition based. It's approximately $1,000 a week, including room and board and what you break. So, but it's room and board. And if you know how much teenagers eat, that we lose money right there. We fundraise to pay for the other 50%, because that's at 50% of what it costs us, about $2,000 a week per kid. And it's a $2 million budget and we're only in season. You can do the math. But we scholarship on a need basis up to 50%. And then the American True Scholarship is additional 50% of that. So it could be $200 a week for room and board and training and sailing and, Bermuda and all of that. And totally honestly, if there's somebody who really wants to do it and truly cannot afford it, we just make it. We're like, you know what? We need to hire you. You're going to take out my garbage every day and I'm going to pay you $200 a week. So we'll make it happen. It's crazy. I don't know how many people have been involved in schools and financial aid and stuff. It's the kids that need it the most that don't ask. We had one kid who said, I need it, and put in a full sob story financial aid from around here. And he said he didn't have any money. And what he really meant was, my parents don't want me to do this, because all I had to do was Google his 13-bedroom home to realize that no, he was not a charity case, but anyway, does that answer? Yeah. And everybody gets a job when they're done. If they're really good, I'll hire them. And, but I have trouble keeping a hold of them because they're so good and so much in demand. They become professional sailors. Irvin Grove is the sail loft manager in Charleston. Madeline is a designer for North Sails. Seth Cooley is in Sardinia, Italy, is the or maybe Valencia now, is the head engineer for Future Fibers. Lots of boat captains. We have 5 people with American Magic. We have Mark and Charlie going around the world. We have Coco, who's in commercial real estate, because the person who was chartering the boat saw his project management skills and fast-tracked him in a program at their commercial real estate company, one of the big ones that was only reserved for MBA students. And here he was, just barely finished college, but he came to Oakcliff and managed a 50-foot boat and impressed this guy and just like, shoo, in here. He's doing really well. Some are coming back, and after they've had 3 children, wanting to come back and work for me. I'm like, yay. Chris Kennedy is working for Melgis Boat Works in he's in Williams Bay, Wisconsin, and he and his wife, who also was out at Oakcliff for quite a while, they have a flower farm. If you're ever in Wisconsin, Dogwood Farms, but everybody has got skills that they can be successful in. Other questions? I'm sure I'd get a question about New Zealand. Go ahead.
Wait, you're talking about all these different skills that you got, your, these other class codes. And I'm looking at the current American stuff about, it's all technology.
So the current America's Cup boats, are they really boats? Is the question really? No, they're not. And I have this like pit in my stomach going, I must be old. I don't get it. And the person, Henry, that I was with, Harry last night, who was the treasurer of the New York Yacht Club forever, he should be in this is not good. And he is, but we had a very intelligent conversation about why they're not good. You guys, I assume everybody here either loves or tolerates, but definitely watches football, right? So the reason why football is so popular in America is because it's in the schools, it's in the college, it's on TV. But the real reason is because everybody played football in high school. Everybody had a connection to it. They're either cheerleader in the old days, and they were now, I separated my shoulder playing football, but they were associated with, they remember when they were young. And there's nothing more of a connection than some guy who had one great catch when he was 17 years old, and 40 years later, he's in his armchair with his Budweiser going, I could have done that. Right? So there's this connection and there's this relationship with it. Those boats don't provide that to anybody, And I just, before this last week, the week before, we just raced Courageous, the famous 12-meter in the 12-meter worlds with a young and diverse team. Indian, Hispanic, Taiwanese, Senegalese, South African, just goes back and back and back. And those, other than Mamadou, who's from Senegal, I thought he was 28, he's 40, he's just very beautiful. They were all under 30, other than myself and Mamadou. And they were into it. They didn't ever say, oh, this boat's slow, I wish I could go on a foiling boat where I have a helmet and somebody's talking in my ear. They're like, this is great. That spinnaker almost went in the water. Watch out for the spinnaker pole. We're athletes, so that's the problem, is there isn't the connection that we can all relate to. And I'd love sailing wasps, but that doesn't make me go, oh yeah, that's how you sail an America's Cup boat with hydraulic arms and crazy stuff. Now, with that being said, Doug and Terry, they're all friends of mine, and we have 5 graduates there, and the technology and the work that they're doing is incredible, but it's not sexy and personable. Mm-hmm.
Paul Flatter is now the director for U.S. Sailing.
What? So Paul. Okay, so Paul Caird was the head of Olympic sailing. And then February 5th, the day I was going on vacation for the first time in years, he blew up the internet by firing and saying, U.S. sailing sucks. So, yeah, but the problem with saying U.S. sailing sucks, when you were solely and completely in control of the Olympic efforts at U.S. sailing, I was like, a hot minute ago, you were U.S. sailing, you asshole, right? So come on. So from that is what's blown up. So now I'm working on a Golden Spinnaker Gala to raise money for the athletes, because we've trained almost every person who's in The Hague right now racing the combined worlds has come through Oakcliff in some form or another. Bringing all the athletes there, bringing all of the parties there. And then I have what I'm calling the Happy Hangover Summit, where after we've had this amazing night, I'm going to get a representative from US Sailing, a representative from the Sailing Foundation of New York, a representative from US Sailing Foundation, Oakcliff, New York Yacht Club, St. Francis, Pensacola, American Magic. And we're going to sit in a room. This is my theory. If I do this, I should be hired by McKinsey. We're going to have each person only be able to say what they're best at. Not better than somebody else, not somebody else sucks. This is what we know in this big American Olympic effort that we can do really well. For instance, Oakcliff can do really well taking the kids from the opties and getting them the experience as they go through puberty and grow or don't grow into the right size boats or into college or into being a mechanic, diesel mechanic, or whatever it is. There's other things that other people can do well. America One can raise better money because they have Paul Caird and he knows all the rich people and they go, oh, Paul, let me open my checkbook. So that's what we're working on. But there's a challenge because we have the Olympics in LA and Shweta, our high performance director, is when she trims mane and every once in a while she's trying to tell me where a puff is and it's like Indian tech support is yelling at me. I'm like, I don't understand you. She's like, the puff. I was like, slow down, just slow down. But she wants to, she'll come in and she'll go, the Olympics are in America. You must have gold in every class. And then she'll start listing the class off. I'm like, let's try. It would be very difficult, but we're going to at least try. Because if you don't say it out loud and you don't push for it, you're never going to ever get there.
Before, you had gold or silver and everything.
I know. We're trying to get back there. Big time in 84.
So wonderful to find the feel of one of those.
One of those huge boats. What's it like? Or do you want?
Is there any possibility any ordinary person can ever
The Oakcliff programs are open to everybody 15 and above. So we often have one or two in every program that are, I call it, transitioning midlife crises when trying to do something else or save up their vacation days and come. So we had Ann Corby, who was a very successful interior engineer, designer, architect. And she came and did the offshore program. And she was sitting in front of my desk, which is super classy. It's a desk that's kind of falling apart that's on cinder blocks. So it's a stand-up desk. And then we have Bill Simon, who was our everything else, operations and race program director over there. And Ann Corby, who at that point was, I don't know, 45, she's talking to me. She's like, Dawn, I really like this. I've been 3 weeks here. I really like this. I think I want to stop being an architect and I want to go to Iris and I want to be a professional. I like the systems, the electronics, the engineering. I want to do this. And I'm like, yeah. And Bill's over there going, you need a pension. You need to be responsible. It was like old school, new school. I'm like, fuck it, just do it. And she did it. And she went to Iris. And now she's one of the more sought after installers of B&G and electronic systems for all the race boats. And she's doing great and is so happy. Doesn't have to deal with toilets in some high rise in Manhattan. So yeah, New Zealand. So I was engaged to a Kiwi. I actually saw him for the first time in forever because he was racing on the New Zealand 12 meter in the worlds. The funniest part there is because we were engaged for 7 years and they say that my friends, a lot of other women were engaged and married. They said the Kiwis, when they ask you to marry them, they don't mean like tomorrow. They're like, you're on layaway and I'll get back to you in 6 or 7 years. In the meantime, we broke up and he said, I still love you. I still want to marry you as long as you don't do anything stupid like an America's Cup again. I was like, oh, I think we're done. But it was a little bit of contentious. And then at the 12 meter worlds, everybody knew me because I'm me and I'm still active and he hasn't been that active. He was coming back. So everybody kept introduced, like they'd be talking to him and I walk up and they go, "Oh, do you know each other?" We're like, "Yeah, we slept together for 7 years." It's like, it's like, yeah, we know each other. Yeah, yeah. How do you know each other? It's like, oh, for God's sake. But I think, how many people here have been to New Zealand? How many people have been to Australia? You got screwed. Because my opinion is New Zealand is one of the best places. It's beautiful. First, let's just start with society. It's like 1950s meets progressive. So when we would have a dinner party, the next day I would get handwritten notes in my mailbox thanking me and inviting me to another dinner party like 3 weeks later. But Maori, Pakeha, cultural, racial, totally liberal. Women on the sailboat, not quite as much, but I took care of that a little bit on TV. That's another whole story. But the sailing is so beautiful. It's like Hawaii that's been worn down a little bit and more temperate, if that makes sense. And Hawaii is just like cones. Somebody wanted me to start Oakcliff in Hawaii. I'm like, where? I mean, God, nothing about Maui, but there's not that many harbors. There's not that many places to go. In New Zealand, I did a women's flotilla. We had 3 boats. We had 3 coaches. I was the one that was coaching them in navigation and seamanship. We had another coach that would do all the interior systems, the engine on all the boats. The oil got changed like regularly because each day a different group would learn. And then we had Merritt, who was doing the rigging and the foredeck and going up the mast and all that. And we would sail into places like Whangamumu and Whangapapa and all these different places. But there was one where it was basically a volcano and then the crater and the volcano and the wall had fallen into the sea. So you go into a harbor and there's a circular island in the middle of this. That was the perfect opportunity to do the navigation, where I gave them a compass and a pencil and a chart. I said, find out where you are. Cross bearings from tops of the volcano over here. There was another one that one's Whangamumu. Yeah. It was an old whaling port. So you go into this, there's nobody there. You go in, and part of the reason it was whaling is that there's springs and there's still the pools and then old pipes, so that you could just take a shower under spring water. South Island, the sounds down there, Doubtful Sound. I haven't been to Sweden and the fjords, but I've had more than a few people tell me that once they got there, that it was more beautiful than anything they'd seen in Sweden. So if you can go, take your time, get a caravan, so a trailer, or an RV, and just go. And if you're a sailor, you'll find people. I was in Akaroa, so you've got South Island, Christchurch. Akaroa is a little tiny French town. And the reason why it's French is because the French discovered the South Island and bought the South Island. And then they went back to get the rest of the money from their king. In the meantime, the British bought the rest of it, but kept that little part for them. So there's this little tiny town that's Akaroa, and I stayed there at an Airbnb, and then they figured out that I was a sailor. Then they asked me to sail with them on a race. Turns out their son came to Oakcliff 10 years ago. So it's just, but yeah. And nowadays it's also kind of fun for me, because when I go there, I remember where I'm going, sit down with my friend John and Caroline having a coffee at a cafe, and Peter Montgomery, which is like the Walter Cronkite. It's like, hey, Donzie, like I haven't been there for 2 years. And they go, hey, how you doing? Other people. I mean, when we came in on Maiden, that's in the movie. If you guys remember when Tracy goes, and Dawn said, what are those little birds? We came in at like 3 a.m. on a Sunday, on a school night, whatever it was. And there were people on all of the piers, on the roofs of all of the sheds on the piers, just cheering us on. It was hundreds of thousands of people in the middle of the night. So they're sailing mad, which makes it better. But it's also just so beautiful to be there. So in your cruising worlds, put that one on your plan. It's on the other side of the world, but trust me, you can get there. It's not that far. I see looking at watches, and I see people getting kind of ready to go. Pardon?
What was your favorite racing boat to sail?
Oh, my favorite racing boat to sail in. You know what, the Jules de Vrolijk 66 we have right now, numbers, is really amazing the way it feels. America True, that yellow boat, that when I stepped on the boat, the designer was super nervous. And he's like, I said, Phil, you did it. This is good. He goes, how do you know? I'm like, I just know. I feel it. There's 2 boats in the America's Cup out of the 12 or 15 I've sailed on. And you step on it, you're just like, oh, this is good. And it just fits and it feels and it's smooth and it's just right. And then for little boats, I used to always say J22s. I haven't sailed one in a really long time, but I like J22s because they're so much more comfortable than J24s, just straight up. And they still are dinghy-like, so you can do some good match racing. I don't know. Whichever boat catches my fancy on any given day. All right. Yep. No, I've only done 2 Bermuda races. And because I'm from the Great Lakes, so when everybody from the New York Yacht Club goes, well, how many Bermuda races have you done? I'm like, 2. How many Mackinacs have you done? So I've done 37. Yeah. And if you're from the West Coast, you've done Transpacks, you know, when you put the 2 together. Last time I counted was 37, but I think
So you're in the old club.
I don't need to be called an old goat. The old goat is some, the old goat is when you've done 50, 25. Yeah, no, I'm definitely goat material, but I don't need to do that.
How do you think sailing can be made more popular? What would it take to?
What can
make
it
a
do?
popular sport?
So there's a few things, and the thing I talked about to make sailing more popular and more prevalent, we have to keep evolving with the times, and you have to be big picture as opposed to this is what I know. So a couple of things. One, community sailing is huge. Just looking in here, this is a mixed group of men and women, and having groups like this where you're saying, yes, you can, are super critical. Having elitist clubs don't help at all. Having easy access to boats. Not one thing that always happens is US Sailing, God rest their souls. They came out, so at Oakcliff, if you're interested in how to get to the Olympics, we have something called the Olympic Helix. And I was like, it's like a parking garage where you just keep going around and around on the same floor until you're ready to go to the next floor. And thank God somebody in the marketing department goes, I don't think we can call it a parking garage. And they came up with a Helix. So you just keep going around on the rungs until you get up the path. So it's not a straight path, but you need to be able to make decisions and say, I want to do this. In other words, on that, you don't push somebody to go to Florida and spend all their money doing Orange Bowl and getting lots of coaching and then go to St. Petersburg if there's 15 and they can't drive yet. So you start to find out what works for who your target market is. And it doesn't always have to be the fattest, hottest, sexiest, expensive boat. I mean, I'm sure that you guys don't all own Grand Prix carbon fiber racers, right? When we trained for America True, we match raced in J24s that were painted with bottom paint because they were donated to the junior sailing program and they let the kids paint it any color they want. Didn't matter that they were ugly and slow because they were equally slow for match racing. One thing that we do at Oakcliff that does help, and we have a lot of people that come through there, is that we have Wednesday night racing with coaching and Thursday night match racing drills. Wednesday night fleet racing with coaching means that we coach, because we're just racing, right? We coach while you're racing. So normally in every other regatta, if you screw up, you have to wait till you finish to try to remember what it was and who did what. And then maybe you have a coach or somebody else that says, oh yeah, you put the spinnaker up sideways. You're like, oh, was that it? We go and we're like, never seen a topping lift that tangled before. You want to check that? You know, in the middle of the race. So then they can go, oh shit, fix it, and then still have success. So we have that. We always have a pre-brief. We always have a debrief. We make it so that you're getting value when you're there. Because the big thing, especially about 6 years ago, was nobody has time, way before COVID. Nobody has time. Sailing's too slow, takes too much of your time. I have all this, I have kids, I have soccer, I have work, I have tennis, I have whatever, pickleball. We found that we did a survey. People that were coming to the program, they're coming from New York City, so an hour on the train here, pre-brief, sail for 2.5, 3 hours, train home after a beer, go to sleep, go to work the next day. We asked them how many hours, or we asked them if they had time to sail. They said, not any more than I'm sailing. And then we gave them a report of how many hours they were spending like 18 hours a week sailing. But if you'd said, do you have time to go sailing? They would have said no. But because they were getting value out of what they were doing. So you're cruising. Why are you doing it? To enjoy. Doesn't matter how far you go as long as you're having a good time. Not going to condone alcohol while sailing, but when you get to port and you have a glass of wine, that's part of the experience. You don't have to sail like my dad did with no engine until we jibed the spinnaker all the way up the canal and tied the boat up, right? You can turn the engine on and motor back and anchor and have a chat. So it's trying to give people value. So community sailing's big. Obviously, TV and media and articles and social media and all of that is important, and for getting young people. The other thing is, as the sport gets older, which I'm seeing a huge influx of young people now, though, really, truly. Last night, there was about 6 young people there at this shishi high-end thing that were so excited about sailing that I haven't seen in the past 8 years. But the young people just saying, yes, you can. And for the US sailing, for so long, we said, you have to get an Opti, then you have to get a BIC, then you have to get a laser, then you have to get a 420, Club 420, then an I-420, then maybe a 470. And then they'd be the best person in their junior sailing program. And they'd get on a Catalina 25 and they'd wrap the winch they have winches, right? They wrap the winch the wrong way. And some old guy would yell at them and they'd be like, well, I don't like sailing big boats, and they're done. Right? So we have to mix and mingle and social and coach and give value. And then it'll continue growing. It's not money. It's not time. It's fit, marketing, pitch, enjoyment, satisfaction. In my opinion, I do have a degree in advertising. All right. Anything? I think we're about, did you have one last one? Why do the round the world races go the way they go? Because theoretically that's downwind, because the world turns one way and the wind goes the other way. And so theoretically that's the way the trade winds go and the currents. That's also the reason why Cape Horn is so nasty, because it's like the rapids in a river, both in the water, because that's the closest place land is to Antarctica, but also those are 2 high land masses. So the winds, so the weather systems, that's why the tall ships couldn't make it around. The funny part is that you've been out and seen a river in rapids. When it gets to the narrowest part, it's smooth. So actual Cape Horn is often very calm, but it's a bitch getting in and out. Okay. All right. Thank you guys. Come visit me in Oakcliff. We have moorings and showers and gourmet kitchen.
So, thank you, Don.
Yep.
Appreciate it. We do have donation going to your charity, to
Thank you.
your organization.
Thank you.
That'll be in the mail.
It'll go directly to the kids.
We didn't bring it tonight in person because
Okay.
I don't like carrying that much money.
Oh, that
Uh,
much money. Woo.
But we do have a couple of parting gifts.
Okay.
Pelagic Sailing Club for when you're going sailing in the winter months.
In the winter months. Yep.
And
Or skiing, cross country skiing,
and
and a buff. Thank you very much.
so thank you for your time.
Yep.
Thank you for making the effort to get here, because I know that planes, trains and automobiles is
Yes.
legitimately what you've been up to.
Exactly.
So I
Exactly.
want to thank you
Thank you.
and see you all next month.
Okay.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
one.